first things first, we'll talk about Taylor Bowen. Bowen, and something you're going to realize when you look at who Alabama has both re-signed from a team perspective, right? The guys we were retaining and the guys we're bringing in. A huge thing that Alabama's worried about is length, right? It was something that you saw Alabama concerned about in that Duke game. I talked about it at length in the recap of that Alabama-Duke game, how long Duke was, how much they were able to really cause us issues in both the front and backcourt, right? Having guys with the extreme length that they had definitely caused us some issues. Alabama was long in the front court last season, but the backcourt definitely struggled. It's something that you will see over and over and over again with this season. You're seeing much longer guys that Alabama's recruiting, and a lot of that has to do with it really feels like Alabama's prioritizing defense. I know both of these guys are very good offensive options, but it does feel like Alabama is trying to prioritize length to be able to be better on the defensive end, but with the notion that Nate Oates has been a very, very good offensive coach his entire time in college, and that he could probably get the offensive output out of his guys, right? Which I'm more than happy to see, right? I do like that Alabama's prioritizing defense as it relates to that. It does feel like if we worry a little bit more about the defense, the offense still can follow. Again, Alabama has a style in which I think offensive players thrive, and so it does continue to be super successful. So first things first, you got Taylor Bowen. Big thing, he's 6'10", right? He is going to be your Grant Nelson replacement at the 4, right? I would expect Bowen to start for you. In my projected starting lineup currently, Bowen is your starting 4, and that doesn't seem, anywhere near to change. I expect him starting at the 4, Aiden Sherrill starting at the 5, so I expect that to be your starting front court lineup. The thing that Bowen brings you is a real defensive ability, right? He's somebody that was second in the ACC in block percentage. He was 69th in the country in block percentage at just over 7% this year. But additionally, what he gives you also a length from a steal perspective, right? There's a clip that's floated around, and I know I've tweeted it out a couple of times, but where he gets a poke-free steal on a guard, goes up, finishes it with a dunk, right? Just an ability. Bowen has a real ability and a knack for being able to defend not only his position, but out on the perimeter with having quick hands, being able to get steals, but also, just having a knack for knowing what he's doing with the ball. The other thing, and obviously the reason why Alabama was super high on this guy, it really came down to Alabama and Kentucky before we got his commitment. And the reason why most people were after him is Bowen was the number 1 3-point shooter in all the ACC in conference play. He shot over 47% from 3 in conference play. In the full season, he shot 41% from 3. He made 29 of 30, 24 of 51 from 3 in conference play. Again, he was just a really, really good 3-point shooter, obviously averaging about 2 per game on attempts. But it's just a standpoint of Bowen being able to stretch the floor, also having that 6'10", really long wingspan at 205, right? He's somebody that can really defend his position really well as defend on switches out on the perimeter. It's a guy that really does everything that Alabama wants to do, right? When you hear Nate Oates talk about what his vision for Alabama basketball and for his system is guys who can pass, dribble, and shoot at every position, right? It's the reason why Aiden Sherrill was somebody that he recruited so highly out of high school, and somebody that he really wanted and saw as his prototype center. It's the reason why Nate goes after these style of guys, right? The reason why Grant Nelson thrived in our system. You want guys that can pass, dribble, and shoot, and guys that can kind of defend even if you have to swap, because Alabama did a lot of switches, right? And, Taylor Bowen being able to get switched out on a guard and not only being able to hold his own, but be able to get steals and such is something that would be huge for us moving forward, right? When you talk about the defensive versatility that a guy like Bowen brings, it's the reason why he was one of the top players on Alabama's recruiting board, right? when you look at the guys that Alabama was going after hard and heavy to open the transfer portal season, Bowen was near the top of that list. The other guy we're going to talk about in this class is somebody that we were also super high on. We've been high on since he was in high school. But right, Bowen, it was a situation, like I said, Alabama wanted him. Alabama knew what he did for our system. Obviously, we had a need to fill with having Grant Nelson gone and some of the other front court people leave that we've discussed, whether it be Jaron Stevenson or Darion Reed and such, right? We had a spot at the 4 that we really needed to fill, and it really felt like Bowen was the perfect fit for that in the portal. So you're able to bring in a guy that's super skilled. Obviously, you fill a position of need. You fill with a guy that is just very good at what he does. Also a guy that has just a really cool story. Bowen, and if you've not seen any of his story about his early life and how he got to college and how he got into basketball and stuff, you really need to pay attention to it. I thought it was really, really cool. A guy who also played for Preston Murphy and Expressions, so obviously the Preston Murphy attachment there. The reason why a lot of people came after Preston Murphy this offseason, right? Indiana made a run at him as well as some other schools. Preston Murphy is a guy that a lot of teams want because they know the connections that he has and what he does for his players. So Preston Murphy is a guy that obviously Alabama has been great to retain. And, he's a huge reason why Alabama's able to land not just Taylor Bowen, but Jalil Bethea that we'll talk about here in just a second. Like I said, very, very happy to get a guy like Bowen. I think that what he gives us from a defensive perspective as well as an offensive perspective is absolutely huge. I think that overall it's really going to allow us to have that versatility that we need, similar to what we had from Grant Nelson, but obviously different. But I think that what it gives us is just massive. I think that Bowen gives us a little better defending on the perimeter. I think Grant Nelson was maybe a little bit better in help side defense. Not that Bowen is bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that Bowen is much better on the perimeter and kind of on the ball as compared to Grant Nelson was. So that's what I think about Bowen. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of discussion about him. This will not be the last time we talk about him. As later on in the offseason, once our roster is fully set, I'll talk about what my projected starters are and kind of my minutes rotations. But, just a heads up, both guys that we're talking about today will be in the projected starting lineup. Both guys today, will be fairly heavy minutes guys. I think that both guys are ones that you really have to, when you pay attention to what they're able to do and what they do as a team, it's just hard to say, hey, these guys are not going to play major roles, right? Both guys shooting almost 80% from 80% from the free throw line. Both guys very, very good 3-point shooters. Both guys, solid from the 2-point range. I fully expect both of the guys that we're discussing today to be in that starting lineup. So, when you're thinking about Alabama's potential, this is two guys that absolutely have to be at the top of your list.